Hey guys, Chris Fix here. Today I'm going to show you how to change the outer tie rod. This is a really easy job, and let's begin. So here are all the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a breaker bar, some type of hammer or mallet, needle nose pliers, a wrench, a torque wrench, a ratchet, socket, and your new outer tie rod. So here's your tie rod. This is what turns the wheel when you turn the steering wheel. So it connects right to the knuckle. And if you want to watch a video that'll show you how to tell if your tie rod has been worn out, there will be a link to that video in the description. This tie rod is shot, the rubber boot is bad, it's making a lot of noise, so let's change it out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen this nut up here. This nut is what helps keep everything in alignment. In my case it's a 7/8. Now that it's loose, we want to just snug it up just a little bit because we don't want to lose the alignment spec on this. I'm getting the car aligned, but this will help you keep your car in a relatively good alignment. So I'm not tightening it, I'm just kind of getting it up against here. The next step is to take this cotter pin out. You can see the cotter pin goes through the castle nut and then wraps around the nut. So just simply straighten out that cotter pin and then grab the eye here and pull outwards. You might have to straighten the cotter pin some more as you pull. So we got the cotter pin out. After the cotter pin's out, we get a socket and a ratchet. In this case mine's a 13/16. Get it on here. I included a breaker bar in the tools because you might need a breaker bar to get this off, especially if this is rusted on here really tightly. I don't think I'm going to need a breaker bar. So now the castle nut is off. This might be hard to lift straight up because it's seized on here. So what you do is, if you don't have the special puller, like there's a fork puller that goes in here and you could use it to lift this up. I don't have that tool, most people don't have it. Just get your castle nut, screw it on the bottom of the threads upside down. And you screw it on, and then you take your rubber mallet or a hammer and just hammer this baby up. Take your castle nut off again and pull that out, just like that. Now with it out, we don't want to touch this nut back here, but this should spin freely. If you can't unscrew this with your hand and it's tight, just get an open-ended wrench, get it on this flat part. You can see there's a flat part right here, and then you just get the wrench on there and you turn it, and it'll give you that extra torque that you might need. Whatever you do, as you're unscrewing this, don't touch this nut. So we have the outer tie rod end off, and I just want to show you this nut here. This nut you should not touch because it's going to mark your alignment. If you don't touch this, then when you put the new tie rod on, it'll go directly to this nut and you'll keep a similar alignment. You're probably still going to have to get your car aligned because your toe is going to be off a little bit, but this is a good way to keep your alignment as close as possible. So here's the old tie rod. You can see the boot got ripped and then grit and stuff got in here. So out with the old, in with the new. Now, as always, you want to make sure you have similar parts, and these guys look good. These guys are actually the same exact length, so this is going to help me keep my alignment straight. If they're different length, then your alignment might be off more than you would think. Now you just simply put the new tie rod right on the end here, make sure it's square so you're not cross-threading it, and just tighten it down. So you're going to tighten this all the way, and that's completely tight by hand, and then you're going to back it off a quarter turn. Just like that. That'll give you space to tighten this, because you did loosen this nut, remember. So now we're going to put the tie rod into the knuckle, and you could just move your tie rod around, move the stud, and then move the knuckle. And it'll slide right in just like that. Now we're going to take our castle nut and hand tighten it. This is going to get torqued down to 44 foot-pounds for my truck. Good. And just by luck you could see that the cotter pin hole lined up. Grab our new cotter pin, slip it right in. Now just open the cotter pin up. So you want your cotter pin to be completely against the nut and wrapped around the nut on both sides, and that'll just prevent vibration from loosening up the castle nut. Now one more step, tighten this nut down. So now we're going to tighten this nut that we loosened at the start. We're going to force it against this tie rod end, and that's going to keep this in place. So I'm just going to use an adjustable on this, grip it down good, and then tighten this down. Since you can't use a torque wrench on this, I can't really give you a torque spec on it, so just tighten it down as hard as you can. Good. I should mention that the kit comes with a new nut. This nut isn't as big as the old nut. and doesn't have as many threads. You want as many threads as possible, because the more threads, the more this will stay when you hit a pothole and from all the vibration and stuff. So I'm going to use the old one because the old one is thicker. In addition, I use this as my marker for my alignment. Now if you're going to replace it with one of these, when you remove the outer tie rod end, just get some paint and paint the threads that go on the tie rod end. So then you know how far you have to put the new nut in when you screw it in. This comes with a grease fitting, so just hand tighten that in. And this happens to be a 9/32, which is really small. And you're going to just snug it. You don't want to go crazy. There's no need to tighten this down a lot. This one isn't directional, so it goes straight up. If it's directional, you'd want to use an open-ended wrench and then point it outwards, so if, when you have your tire on, you could still grease it. So the final step is to use your grease gun. You don't have to do this because that comes pre-greased, so you could wait to grease it till your next oil change. But I always like to add a little bit of extra grease. Just expand that boot a little bit. Good. Now we're done. We just replaced the outer tie rod. Really simple job. Takes less than 10 minutes. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing. I publish how-to videos weekly, and I answer all the questions and comments you guys leave below. On the screen will be how-to videos. If you're interested in one of them, click on the screen, and the links to those videos is also in the description below. And finally, the links to my Facebook and Twitter pages are in the description below.